Welcome to By George, an 80 Players podcast here at the George Theater. I am your host and marketing associate, Miranda Zabst, and today I have with me...
Hi, I'm Rachel Stange, and I am producer and conceiver of Esther, a new dance musical starting off the fall season here at 80 Players.
I am so excited to get to sit down with you today.
Me too.
I know
Thanks for asking.
Of course. I think it's so fascinating to me because, again, being a film person, and I'm going to give a caveat now to the audience, I know I say I'm a film person over and over again, but this is the time where I'm really going to hone in because
You're becoming a theater person now. I can tell.
Thank you. Yes, I'm trying so hard. Being in film and being a producer in film, it's surprising to me. I realized this morning. I haven't actually sat down with a producer for theater yet. And it's like, but there's so much I feel like we're going to have in common. And it just fascinates me to see how you've gotten here. Yeah. So I have so many questions. So thank you for sitting down and talking with me. Sure. But before we get into all of that, I'm going to try and hold myself back. I want to know about who you are. Yeah. How did you get to producing Esther? What is kind of your history?
Let's see, where to start? So I am a Texas girl.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
I went to, we started out in Conroe, Texas, which is near Houston. And then my family moved to Kerrville, Texas, which they call the Texas Hill Country, which is near San Antonio, for those that don't know. And then I went to Baylor University, so Sickle Bears. So I started out there, but I loved New York City. It was a dream of mine to be there. So I studied journalism at Baylor, and I went on to become a reporter and producer for KWTX in Waco, Texas.
Whoa.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I first started out, I didn't get bit by the theater bug right away. Now, Miranda, I think you're too young to know who this is. I'm at that age.
Let's see.
But do you know who Mary Hart was with Entertainment Tonight?
Oh, I don't.
You don't. See,
I'm so sorry.
Okay. But she was like the big entertainment anchor for Entertainment Tonight, which back then was like the big news channel for entertainment. Right. So I wanted to be the next Mary Hart. I did an internship for Entertainment Tonight in Los Angeles, but then I just ended up what we call hard news. Okay. So I worked for KWTX, which I mentioned earlier, as a CBS affiliate. Okay. So I was with them, and then I wanted to make that move to New York. I was like, I got to do it. I'm in my early 20s. It's now or never. Yeah. So I packed up. I sold my Mustang. I had a little Ford Mustang that I sold for $8,000. And I just thought I was so rich. I mean, I was like, oh, I'm moving to New York with $8,000.
Yeah. Gonna live
little did I know that $8,000 went so fast. Oh my goodness. Rent in New York City. So I moved up there, and I thought, I'll work for entertainment news when I get there. And I went to all these different news organizations, and they were like, we can't let you up. They wouldn't let me pass security because, in Texas, you can go talk to people and whoever. Well, in the smaller towns, probably not Houston. So they were like, just put your resume in online. So I thought, okay. So I started doing that, but I never got anything. Nobody ever responded. Right. So I started working in a bakery, and then I walked a dog on my lunch break.
There we go.
For extra money to live in New York City. And one day this guy came in with a CBS News cap on. I said, do you work for them? He was like, I do. So I always kept my resume with me.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
So I handed him my resume. Said, I tell you what, why don't you send this directly to my email? So within about 2 weeks, I had a job with CBS News in New York. That's amazing. Just as an associate producer, nothing fancy. So,
but that's a foot in the door. But
yeah. So I just learned like how difficult it is to break into the entertainment news. And as I was there, I started seeing a lot of theater. And I just loved theater. I was like, this just speaks to my soul. Right. So in CBS News, we're all together in one building. So CBS 2 is the local New York.
Oh, okay.
And then I worked upstairs, which was all over.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I was down there talking to, her name was Dana Tyler, and she did all the press for Broadway. She said, I tell you what, let me introduce you to my friend Chris Bono from Bono Bryan Brown. I actually met them, and I started interning for them. So I interned during the day for the Broadway press office, and then at night I would go to work until finally they hired me. So I did press for about maybe about a year and a half, and I met my now boss, who I still work with.
Ooh.
Her name is Jamie DeRoy,
Okay.
and she was a co-producer on The Norman Conquest, and we met.
Mm-hmm.
And one day I was like, do you need an assistant? I would really love to learn how to produce.
Right.
She said, my assistant actually might be leaving,
Whoa.
the one I currently have.
Right.
And I said, great. And he did end up staying on a little while I was there, but he was leaving. So she brought me on, and we've been together for 12 years.
That's amazing. My goodness.
So I still work for her to this day, even though I do my own producing as well.
Right.
But she's so connected in the world of Broadway that it's just so good for me to be in her office and have, my ear to the ground on what's happening in theater there. So that's kind of my journey into theater and into producing and learning how to do that.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
So I want to, and I'm going to get nitpicky because I just find it fascinating.
That's fine.
Those internships that you did, were they just internships? Were you getting paid to do those, or is that just an extra?
No, so it was just an internship.
Right,
They would give you a stipend for like travel. And it was a little different because I was older and I wasn't in school. So most of the time you get a credit for that. But it was a bit different because I wasn't in school.
Right.
I was like the oldest intern
I get
ever.
That.
But it was so fascinating to watch these other interns who loved theater. They knew. So I grew up idolizing news.
Right.
And I knew all the news people, but they knew every show. And I mean, back into the 40s and 50s, and they would all talk about it. And I was like, I am behind. I got to start reading some books and catch up on all this theater history, because theater people are amazing. They are so passionate.
Yes.
And I just loved it. I loved how passionate they were.
That's so fascinating. And I love, in everybody's story, you hear it. People who kind of make it big, who get a name for themselves and are doing productions like this. They talk about where they came from, and it's always that little bit of luck that you hear in it. That you had applied, you had tried, you had walked in and got nothing, and it just so happened that you were working at a bakery, and then somebody had walked into you, and you had that resume with you, and you had the guts to go and ask them and talk to them, and it's like, there's so many just little pieces of luck that you also have to have. And you have to be prepared. You have to have the work ethic, but then it's also, you have to be in the right place at the right time.
Just always being prepared, no matter what, because you just don't know.
Right.
Sometimes you feel down and out, like nothing's working. And then that next minute could be your break.
Right.
So it's like, just don't give up.
Right.
Just keep going. You never know.
And I've always wanted to move out to LA, again, being in film. And so I thought that's what I was going to do when I graduated college last year. I was like, okay, I'm going to move out. I'm going to go. And then I got this job here. And I think, again, I'm supposed to be here. I'm so glad that I'm here. And I didn't take that leap. I do think I'll take that leap at some point.
And every point you're at is getting you closer to where you want to be.
Right.
So I'm sure you will. I'm sure you'll get there.
Yeah, most definitely. My friends are always trying to tell me to go to New York because, again, I have a lot of theater friends, and so they want to go to New York, and they're like, "Well, you have to come with us." I'm like, I don't know if New York is for me, but I don't know.
That's so funny because that's kind of my story. Was LA was really better for entertainment news.
Yeah,
but New York, just something about the heartbeat of the city was what I fell in love with. And I love LA too. It's great, but it's a totally different vibe.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah.
And so I would just want to be in New York. I was like, that's what's calling me. Luckily, that was where I was supposed to be because I met my husband there.
Oh, that's the best.
I know. Man. So that's exactly where I was supposed to be, and met him at church.
Yeah.
Which is so funny. When I left Texas, at Baylor, I was in a sorority. And I won't tell you our secrets. We're not supposed to. But there was a thing where we would celebrate the women that got engaged.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So all the girls were getting engaged, And I was like, oh, well, and at my time, now women are getting married in their 30s and 40s. They're really doing careers and things like that. But when I was in college, it really was. You get married and you have kids. And so I felt a little, left out there. And I remember going, I'm going to do New York anyways. It doesn't matter. I'll do my career. If I get married, great. If I don't, fine. And it's so funny because that's where I met him. It's like I met him within a week of coming to New York. Yeah.
I love that so
I know.
much.
And now we have 2 beautiful daughters, Alexandra and Catherine. They are 11 and 8. I know.
Beautiful.
So you just see, again,
Yeah.
you never know when it's going to work out.
Right.
I know.
Just trust.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah. That's so hard.
It is.
But okay, so moving into kind of Esther. So you're doing producing, you're associate producing and all of these things. You're working your way up. Where does Esther come into the story?
So I told you about Jamie and working with her. And so she's what they call a co-producer.
Okay.
So on Broadway, if you open your playbill, you'll see people at the very top. And those are your lead producers. They're the ones that do like what I've done with Esther, start from the ground up with either an idea, or they've gone to a reading and really loved something and want to pick it up, or they've done like another property, like a film they want to turn into a stage show.
Gotcha.
There's different ways, but once we get to a certain level, we really need these co-producers to come on, and they raise a certain amount of money for us, and they're so integral to what we do, and they're the reason we can do, because Broadway is costing like up to $25 million these days. You know, that's a much larger musical, and don't quote me, I know there's a lot of people out there who know exactly what the cost is today. But around, you know, it can get
Millions.
that high.
Yeah, of course.
So we so need them. But so when I was working for Jamie, I get to see all the things like the Broadway budgets and hear the meetings about all the Broadway things. But I really was interested in bringing something from the ground up.
Right.
I wanted to see if I could do it. So I've done some little smaller plays, off-Broadway plays.
Gotcha.
But this is my first really big musical. And growing up, the story of Esther was my favorite Bible story.
Yeah.
I loved her strength and courage. I mean, she was up against so much, because in that day, women did not have any power at all. And she used her wits about her, you know, to have the king come to a banquet that she's prepared for him, to risk her life to do the things that she, you know, needed to do. Is just simply amazing to me. So I loved the story. And I loved how God worked through Esther. And Esther is perfect to bring to all audiences, because it's really not proselytizing. You know, nowhere in the book of Esther does it say God.
Right.
But you can see God's hand moving in it.
Right.
So there is a line in one of our songs, and it's where Haman, the bad guy, is singing, and he says, and it gets me every time, and he says, even their God can't save them from this fate, but God had already placed Esther there.
Right.
So I love that, you know, how God works in mysterious ways. We don't even see him working sometimes, but he does. So I was really wanted to do something with Esther. But I thought, you know, if we do just a Sunday school version of Esther, it's not going to appeal to everybody. And I thought, what could we do to just really push the boundary and really make it exciting and fresh and new, and something that maybe Broadway hasn't seen in a while. So I thought, and I was sitting in Hamilton, and I was watching like all the way Lin-Manuel Miranda just took like rap to a whole different level. And I thought, oh, what if we did something outside the box? So I love Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah.
Growing up, it was my mom and I would watch it all the time together.
Right.
And, you know, we were always like, who do you think is going to win? You know? And then even when I went off to college and afterwards to New York, we'd still call each other. What do you think about so-and-so? Oh, no, I like her better.
Good.
You know, we would always.
Yes.
So it was like our thing. And I remember, so I was watching Sharna Burgess dance, and she had this race car driver of all people, James Hinchcliffe. And they were just telling stories with their dances. And he had this horrible accident, and they do this thing at the end. If they make it to the end, they get to do a freestyle. And so the freestyle was all about telling the story of his accident. And it just moved me so much, the way they were able to do this through dance. And I thought, oh, wonder if we could do that.
Yeah.
So I called a friend of mine, Stephen Urick. He has since passed away. He's a costume designer and a dress designer. And I said, I've got this crazy idea. Do you think it's really crazy, or do you think it's something I could do?
Right.
And he's like, no, I think it's something you could do. And I was talking, so later that evening, I was talking to my husband, and he's like, oh, he's a dentist. So he's like, I have this patient who's like a ballroom champ, like a world champion.
Yeah.
And so his name's Edward Simon. And so he introduced me, I call him Eddie. So he introduced me to Eddie,
Gotcha.
Who is incredible dancer and has taught world champions. So I started telling him, I was like, so Sharna, who's a ballroom dancer, has inspired me.
Yeah.
What do you think about this?
Is this a good idea?
Yeah. And he was, I think you're on to something, Rachel. I think you're on to something. So we just had this great dinner, and it really inspired me to keep going with the idea. There's this producers, so this is about 7 years ago.
Right.
There's a producer kind of class courses that we take through this company called True. So I was there, and in True, we have certain classes where you take other people's writing and you present it. So I would take somebody else's story and present it as I was producing this work, and so you kind of just learn how to present off the fly. So there was a guy that I met, Dewey Moss, who is our writer. So he and I were in the same class together. Yeah. And we presented each other's work. And so we just got to know each other. And I just thought he was so fabulous. And we connected. We were in my apartment basement in New York City at the time. And we just totally connected. And I said, Dewey, you're such a good writer. I've been here presenting your work that you've written. It's so good. And I said, I have this crazy idea. Yeah. And I said, I want to write a dance musical on the story of Esther. And I said, but I don't write. Would it be something you could write? And he said, let me go home and think about this. He's like, I've never written a dance musical. How do you even write that? Right. So he went home, and I think he got back to me within a couple of days, and he was like, okay, let's meet up. I have some ideas to present to you of ways to tell the story. So he came back over to the basement, and we sat down there, and he gave me a couple ideas. And they were all really good, but we settled together on the eunuchs telling the story. Right, okay. So that they were kind of acting as a Greek chorus, kind of like you saw in Hercules when Disney did Hercules.
Okay, yes. I love Hercules, and I spotted that as soon as I read the script. I was like, okay, they're doing it. The muses, they're like the
muses, and they're like, he's written them so well. They're like prophets, and they see, because back in the Bible, there's a lot of prophets. So I thought it was such an interesting way to tell the story. So he started, I was like, great, let's do it. So he started going back, and he not only took the Bible, but he went all over and studied things out, to really get the story, because it's not only a Bible story. Right. It is from the Torah. It is, it's from lots of different places.
Yeah, it's historical, so there's a lot of references.
Story. Yes, thank you. That's a much better way to say it. Lots of different places.
No, you're good.
Your mind goes boop.
But I feel like some people forget that, like, the Bible is like a historical text.
It is.
And so while we trust it in as God's word, there are other accounts of it that can help us kind of figure out the context of each story. So yeah, I get that.
Yeah. So I had him on board starting to write, and then at first, I thought, okay, I want this to sound like a movie, because I'm into movies too, especially Hans Zimmer.
There we go. Yes.
He's one of my favorites. So I just thought that's the kind of score I need for them to dance to. I could just see them dancing to, that kind of music. Yeah. So I brought on this wonderful composer for film, and her name's Julie. And so Julie was working for us at first, and she didn't do lyrics, though, because she composes for film.
Right,
so
gotcha.
Most of the time, you don't have lyrics in film. Yeah. I mean, maybe you do, and I'm mistaken, but most of the time, it's not. So I was trying to write the lyrics, and that wasn't great. So we quickly realized, like, okay, And then I was down in Nashville for what's called FilmCom. And I was just meeting different people to see if there's anybody interested. And because, it takes money. Each step takes money. So I was there, and a friend of mine named Randall Bain, he was telling me, he was like, you have to meet this guy, David Wise.
Yeah.
And he was telling me all David's accolades. I mean, he works for Disney. He's this gorgeous arranger. He's, I mean, such an accomplished person.
Mm-hmm.
His voice actually used to be when you'd leave Disney World.
Yeah.
And Wish, I think it's called Wishes.
Mm-hmm.
He was singing on that.
Oh,
so it's his voice when you
goodness.
left. I think
Yeah.
they've replaced it since. But so he was so accomplished. And I was like, Randall, I cannot meet David Wise because I have no money. I cannot pay him yet. This is somebody in the big leagues.
Exactly.
You know, and little did I know, David was telling Randall, like, Randall, I don't have time, you know, to meet this girl who's got a dream, you know.
Gotcha. Okay.
So we both reluctantly came to this meeting. And we immediately hit it off.
Yeah.
I told David my idea. He's like, I really love this. I'm really connecting to it. He's like, let me see if I can help you and Julie.
Right.
So we went back and we started trying to finesse but we quickly learned it wasn't a film score, you know? And David said, okay, I think we need to change. And I'm like, I do too. And you don't ever want to, especially somebody as talented as Julie, because it's not her fault.
Right.
You know, it just didn't fit. And so he said, I have this guy out of Nashville that I work with a lot. He's written for country music people. He writes for Lifeway. He's so good. And because he said, I think we need a pop sound.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. He goes, so let us write a song, try it out and see what you think.
Right.
So they wrote the song Mine, which you'll see in the show. That was the very first song that they presented to me, which was a King song, actually, not even an Esther song. And I heard it, and I remember sitting on my couch with my earphones in, listening, and it's like inside just went, yes, this is exactly what I was searching for. I just didn't know it.
Right.
So I called him immediately, and I was like, if Jeremy will come on board, I said, please have him come on board.
Right,
He's fabulous. And so they started working, and Could It Be, I think, was the second song they gave me, which is almost everyone's favorite.
Yeah, just amazing.
And it's just been so amazing. I am so glad that David and I took that meeting reluctantly, but that God put us together.
Right, exactly.
You know?
Well, and that's everything that I'm hearing again is just, it's so, I love this story, and I love what you say about Esther, and that God's never mentioned, but his plan is always, it's moving. And I kind of see that now with the production as well, that every step along, that's so cool. That's so cool.
It is so cool.
Right.
And we ended up, so the music started coming together. I mean, the more they sent, the more I fell in love with it. And so I went with my mom to Dancing with the Stars tour that was at Radio City. And I was sitting there, and Sharna, of course, was in it. And I just turned to her at one point and I said, man, if I could actually get Sharna to be Esther, because she inspired this, how cool would that be?
Right.
And I know. So a couple months later, I was talking to Eddie again. And I was like, man, I would really love for Sharna to be in it. And he was like, you know what? Why don't you try reaching out to her? I have a nephew that knows her, that travels with them sometimes on the Dancing with the Stars tours.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh. And I said, I tell you what, I'm going to try to be professional first and go through her agent.
Right.
So we had sent stuff to her agent, which isn't her agent anymore, by the way. She has a lovely, fabulous, wonderful agent now. And he was lovely too. It's just he never gave it to her. He was like, great, I'll get it to her. And then, so I never heard anything, you know, just never heard. So I was like, oh, maybe she doesn't like it, you know, not knowing, because you never know.
Well, you don't know.
You think they're handing it to him. So I told Eddie, and he said, let me just reach out to my nephew. And just at the time we thought, what if we did a concept video, like a music video to Could It Be?
Right.
That we could kind of, you know, try to get people interested in the show. So I said, okay, go ahead and do it. So he did. And we got a response pretty soon of, ooh, I love this song.
Yeah.
And so Eddie was like, I got Sharna's number from my nephew. You can go ahead and call her.
Right.
And I remember when he texted me this, I was sitting with my husband at a Sarah Beth's restaurant in New York City, and there was nobody there. It was like a weekday, and it was all quiet. And I said, you know what? My heart is racing right now. I'm just going to call her and leave a message because she'll never pick up.
Right.
It's an unknown number. So I rehearsed what I was going to say on her message to him. He's like, sounds great. Go do it. So I walked over by a window and I called her and she picked up. And I remember I first standing in the window going, oh no, I didn't rehearse for a real live conversation.
Nope.
But it went really well, and she could not have been sweeter. And she was like, I love it. I'd love to do this. And so we ended up shooting that music video. It was the first thing we did with her. So it was really cool. And since then, she's actually become a friend of mine.
Yeah.
She's such a sweet person, beautiful dancer, but a beautiful person as well.
She is, yes.
And it's so fun to meet somebody that you're a fan of, and they're actually just so sweet and kind and everything you would want them to be.
Of course, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, that was going to be you being a fan of Charna and then actually getting to work on a project with her. I imagine it would be very nerve-wracking, like this person that you've kind of idolized or kind of just, they're so amazing and I'm so inspired by them. And then to have them in the room with you, you're like, I'm scared now. Like, I don't know if you ever, I see that with the phone call, but I don't know when you guys were ever actually in person, did you still have that fear or was it kind of negated because she's super friendly and super down to earth?
I remember, so when she was flying in for that first music video, we invited her to go to see Once on This Island was on Broadway.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So we'd all got tickets and we invited her to come see it with us. So the first time I met her was in the lobby of a Broadway show at Circle in the Square. And she walked in and I think we were all unsure of each other. Like, I'm sure, I'm speaking for her now, she could tell you, but I'm sure she was like, what have I gotten myself? Who are these people that I've said yes to?
No.
But and I just remember I didn't end up sitting next to her. I was down the row, but I remember watching the show because it was fabulous, but at the same time being like, I wonder what she thinks. I hope she's okay with this.
Right.
Is tomorrow going to go well, with our shoot? And it all went well. And she was so kind that day. And then we got to talk a little bit afterwards. And then the next day when we came in to start working on the stuff and she started working with the other dancers and she was like, I love this so much. It's like fulfilling something that I haven't done for a while because I've been on TV for so long.
Right.
So getting back to stage, that's where she started is on a stage. She was like, this is really fulfilling something within me. Right. So that was really cool.
To my next point, because I wanted to ask you about COVID, because that's something that we had talked about in Charna's episode that she wasn't really able to speak to. But being the producer and having this whole team behind you, how did COVID kind of affect the process of this show?
Yeah. COVID was difficult because we did a workshop in 2019 of the first act in New York. And we came out of that and people, because sometimes when you try to tell them about a dance musical, dance fused with a traditional musical, it's a bit odd. So they can't really wrap their brain around what are you talking about? The dancers tell the story?
Right.
And so I had told my friends about it. And they're like, oh yeah, okay. They're trying to be supportive, but at the same time, they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So after that workshop, it was so refreshing because friends of mine were coming, we get it now. This is so neat. This is such a cool concept. And so I was really excited. And I was having people lunches. They were like, okay, we really think we want to invest in this project. And I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah,
here we go. We are about to take off.
Right.
And then COVID happened.
Yeah.
Not too long after. And then people's financial situations changed. So people that were going to put money in, they're like, I'm so sorry. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. This is just too risky for us right now. And I really kind of sat back and was like, oh no, and I love being a mom and I love being a wife. So there's a part of me that thought, maybe I'll just do that.
Right.
Maybe I'll stop this theater thing. It just really gets to you. And so I remember I was watching a television show and there was an actress on there who is part of the West End.
Yeah.
And she was singing, and I had looked her up, and she was singing all the Sondheim stuff. And it just really hit me like, oh, I love Sondheim. Oh, I still really love theater. I really want to do this. So I ended up, I called Meredith actually, and I was like, let's get something going.
Yeah.
Let's just find a place in New York, you know, way off the beaten path to just do it. And then we started talking, and we were like, we really need to develop it more because we've only had, you know, that one workshop. We really need to find some place that will help us develop it.
Right.
And so my friend Randall, again, he calls me one day out of the blue. And see, this is why I think it's just God things.
Right.
He's like, listen, 80 players in Houston. He's like, they are looking at developing new work. I think you should reach out to them. And I had heard about you guys before and knew how gorgeous this theater was because my aunt and uncle live in Hempstead. So I've been out here.
Gotcha,
yeah. Actually, shout out to them. They're watching my kids. So anyhow, I was like, oh, okay. So a friend of mine, Joan Tanklersley, she was like, oh, I know Kevin Dean there. I'll make a phone call.
Wow.
And so she ended up making a phone call, and we started working together to come up with maybe a spot. And we were going to try to do it last year.
Right.
But they just wouldn't fit. So that fell through, and I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe that's not it.
Right.
And then we talked again, and they're like, okay, how would you feel about opening the season? You know?
Yeah.
And so we were like, yes, we'll take it. We'll do it. And I cannot say enough good things about Kevin and Jamie and Kat. I'm going to miss because we have our Zoom calls like every Thursday, and we all chat and you know, what's going on, what's going wrong, what do we need to fix, all these things. And I'm going to miss those Zoom calls so much. I feel like they're my friends now. But you guys have been just absolutely amazing. I would recommend the 80 Players at the George to anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, after working with us, you may be like, oh my goodness, we're just going to do our own shows. So you may not want that, but I would still, oh yeah, you guys have been so good. I can't say enough good things
Oh my goodness.
about this team. Yeah.
I didn't tell her to say any of that, guys. I need you to.
No, she really didn't. She really, it is so from the bottom of my heart. It is.
No.
Oh man.
That's so kind to hear. That's amazing. And again, like, even though COVID happened and there was this big kind of roadblock in it, I mean, to have that passion and then to have that way paved forward and taking those opportunities, it's hard to recognize, like, some doors are actually open, but they look closed. All you have to do is kind of push the door. And so to take those opportunities, and I think it's just so cool. It's so cool how we end up places.
I know, because, you know, I could have just stopped there and probably life would have been great too. You know, that path would have been fine too. But I just, because nothing was happening, Miranda. And then sometimes it's about taking that step forward. Yeah. And then all of a sudden doors begin to open because you just took a step into the dark sometimes.
Right.
Oh, yeah. I know. I feel like this whole thing is about keep going, keep going.
It is.
Yeah.
I feel, I mean, that's kind of even what me and Sharna were talking about on our episode, is just, you have to learn to be flexible and you have to learn to keep moving forward. Like, if you're truly passionate about something and it's in God's plan, there will be a way. There will be a path forward to it. I want to ask, where are we? Oh man, we're over time, but I have so many questions.
Okay. And I talk a lot, so it just happens.
You're good, but kind of, what is it, before I get into my lightning round questions, how has it been finally? I mean, you've been on this journey for a really long time. I mean, through its ups and downs, and still have this passion for it. What is it like? What is it, a genuine reaction to getting to go to rehearsals and see the show finally, like, coming together in this way?
Oh my goodness. I have cried so many times. Just when I got here, we were over at the Metropolitan Opera rehearsing, and my amazing team, oh yeah, we got to mention them, Rachel Klein and Chase Brock, who are just so incredible and have so many credits to their name. Yeah. I mean, Chase did Spider-Man and Be More Chill, and Rachel did The Gospel According to Heather. So many great things in New York. I mean, they're awesome, awesome people. And Josh, our associate choreographer, just, anyways, awesome people. So anyhow, we got here, and they had already been here for, I think, 2 weeks at that time. And I got in and we had finished some camp for my daughters. And so I was waiting till that was done to get here. And Meredith had been here in my stead, and we switched. And I got in that rehearsal room, and I had to walk out for a little while because I was like starting to ugly cry. And I was like, this is kind of random. And they're like, does she like it?
Does she not? Does she hate it?
Yeah. But no, it was just like, wow. We're here. We've made it to a place where, and just walking in the theater right now during tech, and Eric Frenzen, our costume designer, and it's just, the costumes are beautiful. Matt, our lighting designer, and Alana, our sound designer, and just, and Jason Hart. Yeah. I know, I'm like doing all my shout outs. I'm sorry, but Jason Hart, like the music director, has done such a fabulous job, and I really can't believe when I hear the strings and the drums and the horns and the orchestra, I'm just like, oh, wow. Yeah. This tiny little thought is here at this gorgeous theater. And it is something I will always hold dear, because this is the first one. So I know we may make it, no, I'm going to say we will. We'll make it to Broadway, West End. There we go. When we go there, this one will always be really special because this was the first.
Right, of course.
Yeah. So I'm so thankful. Oh, so thankful. It's really a dream come true.
I can't wait till opening night because I feel that's when it's really going to hit.
That's
when it's like, oh, man.
Oh, I'm going to ugly cry again. I need to go invest in some waterproof mascara.
Yes. I get you.
Because it's going to happen.
Okay, and we're going to be there taking photos for marketing. And so it's like, okay, if you see Rachel crying, look the other way. We're going to take photos over here.
I know. Yes, Jesse and Miranda have done, you guys have done such a great job with our posters and our marketing. Yeah, you guys are incredible.
Yeah. It's been amazing to work with you. And I mean, again, and we're not done yet, but to sit down and have this conversation is just wonderful. Yeah. I find it so fascinating.
Thank you.
But I'm going to run into our kind of last couple of questions, our lightning round.
Okay.
Do you have a theater mishap? So I know you're not necessarily been in theater for a long time, but kind of in your field, in your career, has there ever had a mishap, a mistake that kind of has stuck with you? And what have you learned from it? How have you moved forward from that?
Yeah. Oh, I had a big blunder at the press office. Of course, being a press office, a lot of time all the journalists come to us with certain stories they want to write.
Right.
So we had a production, which I will not name, I loved it. I mean, it was my favorite. I used to sneak in the back and just watch and watch and watch. It was fabulous, but it was historical. So, some may not have loved it as much as I did. So anyways, a journalist was asking if there were, because they were doing this thing about people falling asleep in Broadway.
Oh, okay.
And so I was like, oh, yeah, so that happens in our show. And I was like, it's terrible. We'll hear people snore. Oh, so they took my quote. Well, of course, you never want to disparage your own show.
Right. Yeah.
That's terrible. And so I got into so much trouble for that.
Yeah.
And I just, it haunted me because I was like, Rachel, you should have known that, So I always think now to this day about shows and how can we market them best.
Right.
And it's a real eye opener about don't say everything you think.
Right, exactly. There needs to be some filter.
It's like watch yourself.
Right.
I know, especially with something that you want you want it to succeed. So yeah, that was my biggest blunder, and I was like, oh no, I can't believe I did that.
But I mean, a lesson learned, and and now I haven't done it since.
No, I have not.
And now
I have not.
I'm a little scared to talk about our shows now. Thank you for a new fear unlocked.
Oh, you're so welcome.
So Esther, it's the story of a queen, and she is a woman in her time where women didn't have a lot of power, and she makes this giant sacrifice for her people. Has there been a time in your life where you've had to sacrifice for the greater good, and what was that like?
Yeah, I definitely know. And I do this every single time. Currently, a lot of times as a producer, your job is to, like we've been talking about, is to raise the money. So going out and having dinners with investors. And, my boss is out every night. Every night she's at the theater. But I have a family and they come first.
Right.
And they are my joy and my world. And at the end of the day, they are the most important thing in my life. So a lot of times I'm not able to do those things,
Right.
you know. And then one that's probably in my future is probably to get us to that next level. I'm going to need a producer with more experience
Right.
and just a bigger resume to come on board, which is probably going to push me down the ladder. But for the success of our show,
Right.
that's what we need. So I'm so happy to do that and see us thrive.
Right.
You know. So those are the two. When you asked me that, I was like, those are the two that came to mind.
That's that's wonderful. I mean, yeah, having to learn to take that step back and say, okay, I'm not the best person for this position.
Yeah.
Though I was the conceiver, though I had the part of this idea, it's hard to take that step back. But ultimately for the greater good of the show, because you do sincerely want it to succeed. Yeah. That's difficult. I feel I have, and again, smaller projects, but I've had to face that challenge. And so it's not easy. And I wish you the best of luck in finding a producer.
Much. Yeah, I know. I hope somebody takes some interest in us that can, you know, help us get to that next level, because it's such a beautiful show. Right. You know.
So if anybody out there,
if anyone out there,
if you want to be a part, okay,
yes, please let us know.
My last question is, why do you think people should come see Esther?
Oh, come see this, Esther. It is not your normal Bible story that you see done in your Sunday school productions or your church productions. We really have pushed the boundaries on it, but come with an open mind, because the Bible is full of things that push boundaries. We just don't always think about it that way, but it is gorgeous. Everyone's worked so hard. All the dancers, all the singers. I am just absolutely amazed with their talent. I do not think that you will be disappointed.
I love that. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on this episode of By George. It was so nice to get to sit and talk with you.
It was so nice to talk to you, Miranda. You're so easy to talk to. It's so much fun.
Thank you. But I know you have a couple of shout outs that you want to give.
So yes, I just asked Miranda if I could shout out first my mom and dad, Vicky and Bob, and my Nana, and my Aunt Mary Kay, and my Uncle Brian, and my Aunt Donna, and my Uncle Pete. They have been helping to take care of my children while we've been in Houston. They've been carting them to museums and stores and fun places and swimming lessons. So I just really wanted to thank all of them so much. You know, you just can't do it without your family. So I'm so thankful to them.
That's amazing. Well, thank you again for being on this podcast. Yeah. And thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of By George. Please come see Esther, a new dance musical. We're opening September 1st through September 22nd. So be sure to come get your tickets. The show is starring Sharna Burgess from Dancing with the Stars. It is wonderfully choreographed and the music is amazing. The costumes, everything. You're not going to want to miss it. So please get your tickets. And we'll see you guys when you come in. Bye.
Bye.
Perfect. And that's it.
Awesome.
You did wonderful. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Oh, thank you. That was super fun. This is my first podcast.
This has been By George, an 80 Players at the George Theater podcast, hosted and produced by Miranda Zapes. Listen anywhere you listen to podcasts and follow us on Instagram at By George Theater. That's THEATRE. Sure to like, share, and subscribe. And By George, we'll see y'all next time. I took a little peek in yesterday because I was getting everything set up and I was like, I want to go take a look. So I walked out there and I happened to walk in right at the moment where I think the staircase that they pull in or I guess at the I don't know what you call it, but it had broke. So they had Sharna on top of it and like the stairs ripped from the pallet. Oh no. Yeah. And I was like, oop, I won't watch anymore. Apparently when I walk in, things begin to break.
That's like me when I'm watching a basketball game. If they start losing, I'm like, oh no, I can't let them.
No.
I'll turn it off.
Walked away.
I know. Right.
And then I'm friends with a couple people in the cast. So like Kara and Brad. I don't know if you know everybody, but the two of them. Yeah. So she had, I think you guys had just broken for dinner or something. And so she came and we started chatting and she's like in her costume. It looks so good. It looks so good.
They were saying like this is one of the, well, as far as lights at least, they said this is one of the biggest light things they had done.
Most definitely.
With the show. Because I know you've had some big dance like West Side Story and stuff that were dance heavy. So you have had that here before. But I know. It sounds like we're bringing in some cool stuff.
It is. I just overheard my director and the executive director were talking. They're like, if we don't win an award for the lighting design in this show, I mean, it's what are we
They
doing?
really love that lighting.